Brother Yoram, I wouldn't be wrong if I were to say that your experience was actually a rare experience, and probably your journey was a unique one in a sense. Um, you were involved in exposing the danger Islam you thought posed to the Netherlands, probably to the world, and then you ended up falling in love with Islam.
True.
Now, leading up to this, what was the background? Let's begin from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, assalamu alaikum, of course, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor for me to be here and talk to you. I was born in 1979 in Amsterdam in a pretty regular family, father, mother. I had a sister, an older brother, a younger brother, and a cat. And we were, especially when we were younger, pretty practicing. We went to church. My father read from the Bible before we went to bed. He read from the Bible when we were eating. We prayed. My grandfather even was a help minister in church.
So more religious than average.
Yeah, much more religious than average because, like I said, I was born in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam, of course, everybody knows, very liberal. And it's very secular liberal. So being religious in a very secular setting, liberal secular.
What a contrast.
Yeah, it's a big contrast. And especially I was born late 70s, of course. So when I was younger, it was the 80s. So it was really free in a sense from religion. So there was the background, and yeah, I just had a pretty normal youth in that sense. But and I was interested in religions, especially my own religion, in Christianity back then. So I read a lot of books, and I read from people like Martin Luther, Calvin, and people like Zwingli. So the big names from the Protestant tradition, but they were very anti-Islam. So when I was a little bit older, I asked the minister and I asked my grandfather and a lot of other people about Islam, because I was constantly bumping into Islam in the books. And I asked them, is it really a danger? What is it? And because those people like Martin Luther, they said it was the religion of the devil. And he said, well, of course, it was back then, and we are living now, and a lot of Muslim people are very nice people, but in a sense, their religion is wrong. Of course, it's not the truth. So I was kind of biased. And of course, we have this historical reality with the Ottoman Empire, for example. So in Europe, there is a lot of anti-Islam sentiment, even on an unconscious level. And I made this... I gave this example earlier. When you look at the croissant, for example, you know, the bread, it was shaped in a half moon. And in the last big battle between Christian Europe and the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim Empire back then, of course, was in 1683. And they fought, and in the end, the Europeans won. And they shaped in Austria the bread in a half moon, in a crescent, that's croissant, because and it was symbolizing Islam, and they broke it to show we broke Islam, we are in control, etc. And that's still this, of course, it's not a call for the boycott of the croissant, because I like the sandwich, but
I love it too.
Yeah, sorry, especially with jam. But
it's a fact of history.
Yeah, it's a fact of history, but it's in the culture. And even when you look at municipalities in the Netherlands, for example, yeah, we all have weapons in a way. Hey, you look at heraldic weapons, symbolism. So you see, for example, a lion or in flags and stuff like that. But in the Netherlands, you have what they called merletten. And they are ducks without the beak and without the feet. And a lot of places in the Netherlands still have those symbols in their flags and in their...
What do they symbolize?
Yeah, and what do they symbolize? Way back when there were the Crusades, when... people were fighting the Crusades, and they came back and they survived. And they freed the Holy Land from the Muslims because they were fighting the Muslims. They were rewarded with a symbol. So all the people, the notable people, they got this symbol. And the symbol was without the duck without the beak and the feet. And it symbolized that you fought against the Muslims in the Holy Land, but it's still in the culture. So what I want to say is that a lot of symbolism, and people don't know that, is anti-Islam, and it's in the culture, and people don't know that, but it's just because it's unconscious. So when
Yeah,
you
in fact, unless you search it, you won't know it.
yeah, of course. But if you look at movies, for example, or books and stuff like that, it's all the Arab or the Muslims always scary. He's foreign, he's exotic, he's danger, he's whatever. It's not just a regular guy who's buying a book and eating his croissant. So the combination of me reading a lot of anti-Islam rhetoric from historical books, the historic concepts that we have in the history, that made me a kind of biased person. But of course, the first day I went to university, me going to university, first day was September 11, remarkably, 2001.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was the day of the attack on the World Trade Center. So
What a coincidence.
yeah, it was a coincidence. So I always thought, in a historical sense, the region is kind of crazy. But now I see this happening here in the West: people flying with planes in buildings, killing thousands of people. So me, just being a regular younger guy in the West, thought, well, these people are crazy. And what is it that makes them crazy? Their religion, Islam. And then in 2004, there was this guy who was killed in the Netherlands, who was a famous filmmaker. His name was Theo van Gogh. Theo van Gogh, and he made a lot of controversial movies, and he was killed in the streets by a guy who called himself a jihadi. And they left, they tried to slit his throat, shot him, and they left a knife in his belly with a letter for Ayaan Hirsi Ali, you're next. So I thought, because he
produced the film for her.
Yeah, because he produced this anti-Islamic film for it. So, and I thought, of course, because of the history, the people and the region are crazy. Then I saw this 9/11 thing happening, and then of course Theo van Gogh was killed, and I was biased myself. So I thought, what can I do to stop this horrible ideology of taking over?
So it's become like a cause for you.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I have to be in politics, because the most efficient way to change things in the world is changing the law. And if I can change the law, then we perhaps can protect the country against this evil ideology called Islam. So, and I thought to myself, what's the most anti-Islamic organization in the Netherlands? It was just new, because it was founded in the period that Theo van Gogh was murdered. There was the Freedom Party of Geert Wilders. So I joined in the end the Freedom Party of Geert Wilders, and I was a very active politician fighting Islam. So that's
It's the whole process was cementing in your psyche and in your mind the hostility toward Islam.
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't that I was anti-Muslim, because I had some Muslim friends, but we never really talked about religion. And when we talked about religion, it got a little tense, then we stopped it, and everybody was partying and drinking. So it was very superficial.
They were not practicing Muslims, were they?
Some of them were kind of practicing, but not now. I know some are practicing right now, but back then we were all just like
light Muslims.
Light Muslims, and we too, because I was a Christian, but I wasn't really being a Christian that you should be. Like, let's say we went out with the girls and drinking and doing all the things that a lot of people here in the West do when they're younger. So when it came to religion, we never really talked. But in my mind, I was very anti-Islam. And especially when I got older and I went to university and I started reading. And of course, I studied comparative religion. And a lot of people say, how is it possible? You studied comparative religion on a university and you still end up with the Freedom Party and being anti-Islam, etc., etc. And I said, well, because I was biased, like I said, and you have this reformed glasses on, of course. And I was pretty extreme in that sense as well. So everything that I read about Islam that wasn't too negative, I thought, well, that's liberal nonsense. It's just sweet talking.
But I guess your time within the Freedom Party wasn't that easy. I mean, you didn't see eye to eye on everything, right?
Well, I joined it in 2000, the political year 2008-2009, and I stayed there till 2014, and I was in Parliament till 2017. But when I was in the Freedom Party, first I was like a policy maker. and we have.
So a key person.
Yeah, back then I was helping, like say, the ideologist of the party. So I was his right hand or assistant or whatever you want to call it. And later on, a year later, Geert Wilders asked me, "Don't you want to be a member of parliament yourself?" And then I said, "Well, okay." And then it changed, of course, and I became a little bit more important. But before that, I was on behind the curtains, as we call it in the Netherlands, and I was writing and thinking about the strategy and all the things that we did as an anti-Islamic organization.
And that was the time when the far right was on the rise.
Yeah, it was on the rise because when the Freedom Party started, they had 9 seats in parliament, and when I became an MP, we gained a lot, and we got 24 seats.
Wow, from 9 to 24.
So we were the biggest winner back then, and the second party of the country.
What then made you leave the party?
Well, in 2014, there was this discussion about Moroccan people and
Moroccan people here in
Moroccan people in the Netherlands, and there were. When you look at the criminal statistics, the boys till let's say 23, they're overrated in the statistics. So people say, well, it's Moroccan people who cause problems. Well, when you look at it from a very rational perspective, it's about 4%. So let's say 96% is just doing fine. But the 4%, of course, that is a problem. Everybody who acts as a criminal is a problem for society. So, but it doesn't matter if you're a Moroccan boy or a Dutch guy or whatever. It doesn't matter. But because they are a minority, of course, the focus is on them, and they are overrated in the criminal statistics. So they said, well, Moroccan people are a big problem. But in the end, there was this rally, and Geert Wilders asked the people who were there, do you want more or less Moroccans in the Netherlands? And they said to the people who were there as supporters, you have to say less, less, less. So they were instructed to say less, less, less. And that's what happened. So he asked, do you want more or less Moroccans in the Netherlands? Everybody's going, less, we want less Moroccan. And he said, well, I'll make that happen for you if you vote for me.
So the whole thing was staged?
It was staged, yeah. But there were a lot of people there, and that went viral in a way, and all the media was there. And but I was the spokesperson on this subject in Parliament, and I didn't know that he was going to say that. So I called him and said, what is this? Is it something new? He said, well, we'll talk tomorrow, did that. And it was the day of the elections. So I was in my own constituency, so to say, and we won, of course, there. So we were all partying, but all of a sudden, some people from other parties called me and said, what is this? Is it something new? Because back then, the Freedom Party was still... it was still kind of accepted. It wasn't accepted, of course, like a normal, regular party, but it was more accepted than before.
Well, it was moderately racist.
Really. So, but after this less, it changed, of course. And I thought to myself, well, it's kind of strange to say we want less Moroccans in general, because, and a lot of people don't know that, there are ex-Muslims working for the Freedom Party as well. So, for example, people with a Turkish background who are secular, or Moroccan people, whatever, they who are not raised as Muslims or ex-Muslims, and ex-Muslims are very active and very extreme sometimes in their views about Islam, because they left the religion because of most of the time personal experiences. But they were also supporting the Freedom Party. So I thought it was kind of a betray to say, well, we want less Moroccans in general. It said, I don't have a personal problem with Moroccan people. I have a problem with Islam. And yes, a lot of Muslims in the Netherlands have a Moroccan background. So I don't like the concept of Islam, and because of that, the Moroccan people are scary, etc. But I thought, when I look at it, when I look at them as a group, just as a group, Moroccan people, yeah, well, it's the same as other groups, of course. So there's not an ethnic issue for me. But he said, well, this is what it is. So, and I said, well, that's not what I think, and I'm the guy in Parliament who have to explain what we as a party think and why we want to do this or that. And he said, well, then you have to change your opinion. So I'm not going to change my opinion.
Or leave.
Yeah, and I said, well, then I have to leave. Said, well, you won't leave. But in the end, of course, I left. And then I finally had the time to do what I wanted to do for a long time, what a long-held desire, so to say, was writing an anti-Islam book. And because in the Freedom Party, a lot of people are just producing one-liners. So you wanna be in the newspaper, you wanna be on television. So what you say, something harsh, something funny, something whatever, just a one-liner that you make the news. But of course, you feel, especially when you're the guy who's responsible in Parliament for this subject of Islam, you have the urge to explain, because why do you think? Just not only the one-liners, I want to explain it. Really, I want to explain why do we think it's a problem.
And you thought the book was the way to do it?
Yeah, but in the Freedom Party, you're not allowed to write anti-Islam books, because Geert Wilders, of course, is the poster boy of the anti-Islam movement, perhaps even in the world. So he is the guy who's writing books, and of course we helped him.
He has a monopoly.
Yeah, in the party, and of course we helped him writing some books, and in some books we were mentioned. But I thought, no, I want to really have a good comparison between my own heritage, in a way, cultural, and it's Christianity, compared to Islam. And then we'll see, because it's so extremely different, why Islam is a danger. So that, and after I left the party, I finally had the time to do that. So I started writing.
So you left the party, but you were still an MP.
Yeah, still an MP and still very anti-Islam.
And you wanted to write the book. Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I did. And but yeah, while writing the book, I had to gain a lot of information. I was looking for information, searching information, reading, and but most of the books that I read were from Orientalists, were from people with a Western background writing about Islam, or non-Western people, but not Muslims, writing about Islam. So I was kind of biased, like I told you, all the things that happened, the things I read, the history, etc., the denomination of the church in a way, and all the information that I was reading now. It confirmed what I already thought. But because I wanted to make a comparison between Christianity and Islam, so I had to reread Christianity in a way. And I was still a practicing Christian, of course. And after you become older, you get a little bit more mild in a way, and you start really practicing more than, for example, when you're a teenager, like we talked about a little earlier. So, but there were some concepts in dogmas in Christianity that I doubted as a youngster already. For example, the Trinity. God.
So you had a problem with these at a younger age?
Yeah, at a younger age. And it was not a problem, but I didn't understood them. So I said, well, why is Jesus Christ the Son of God and God at the same time? Why has God a son? Is it a real son? Is that possible? Stuff like that. And it's just regular questions a lot of Christian youngsters have. But also the atonement, that Jesus Christ had to die on the cross for the sins of mankind before God was able to forgive people. And I thought to myself, well, in the same Bible it says God can do everything he wants because he's all-powerful. Why isn't he in... Why can't he just forgive? Why is there someone who has to die first? So those are questions I had as a youngster. And there was another thing, is that you have to believe in the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation.
So unless you believe in them, you're not
going to heaven. You're not going to paradise. But when I was young, one time I asked a minister, and the father of one of my best friends back then was a minister. So I was with them a lot. We went to Bible weekends and stuff like that. But I asked him, how is it possible that, for example, Adam and Abraham and Noah are all in hell? And he said, no, they're not in hell. How can you say that? I said, well, you said the only way to salvation is believing in the resurrection and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But they couldn't believe in it because he was not born yet. So they're in hell. No, of course not. So and I asked him, so there are two ways now. Because they had another way, apparently. And then he said, yes, there's another way, because that was before the New Testament, before the coming...
So those who were before were exempt?
Yeah, so I thought, well, wouldn't it be easier to not have Christ in the whole equation then for a lot of people? Because, with all due respect for Christ, but from a perspective of a 16-year-old boy, it was kind of complex. So I thought, it's too complex for me. I just don't understand it. But when I was older and I was writing my anti-Islam book, those questions popped up again. I was writing about the concept of God in Christianity, and I said, oh yeah, that was this. But at the same time, I was also reading about the concept of God in Islam. And of course, like I said, I studied comparative religion. I knew about the concept. I just knew it as an object of study. I just knew, okay, well, you have those 5 pillars, etc., etc. And but I never dived into it in an existential way. So I never really looked at it. What do they say? What do they mean with Tawhid, for example? And when I was reading about Islam's concept of God, of Allah, who is Allah, and they were talking about Tawhid and oneness, and I thought, well, I have to reread the Bible again. So I was reading, what did Jesus Christ say about God? Only that. That was the only thing I wanted to know. And there is this passage in the New Testament, of course, where this guy comes to Jesus and he asks him, oh, good man, what can I do? And he said, well, first of all, don't call me good. There's only one good. And I thought, well, that's a remarkable statement, because, of course, I thought he is God. And if a person says good to God, then you say, yes, what's up? But he didn't say it. He said, no, there's only one good. And he was referring to God, of course, to the Creator. And then this person asked, what can I do to gain paradise? What's the most important law in our tradition? And of course, they were Jewish people. And he said, well, you have to believe in one God. Hear, O Israel, that's what he said, your God is one. And I thought that's...
So in other words, in the Bible, Jesus denies his divinity.
In that sense, yes. So, and that was something that struck me, and because he...
Why don't Christians pay attention to it?
Yeah, I don't know, because you have the Bible, of course, and you have the tradition. And the explanation of the Bible is done by the tradition. So that's a really Catholic way of saying it now, but so in a Protestant sense, they said, no, well, when you look at the other passages in the Bible, there you see that he is kind of, well, it depends on how you read it. But
and this actually proves Islam's point of view, where the Quran tells us that these books, which were originally God's word, were tampered with.
Yeah, the tahrif, yeah.
They were
changed,
altered.
And there was something that I saw. I said, well, they say it's changed. The Islamic tradition says the Bible or the Christian tradition is changed, especially the Bible and the Injil, etc. So when I was reading it and I saw the New Testament, I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of strange. And in the end, I was convinced of the fact that there was just one God, the one God that Jesus referred to, but also the one God that Moses spoke about, and the one God that the last prophet, back then I wasn't a Muslim yet, but that he spoke about. So I thought they all talk about this one God. So in the end, I thought, well, okay, there's one God. But
so this exercise brought you closer to Tawhid, to monotheism rather than...
Yeah, than believing in the Trinity. Then, of course, I was writing about all my objections against Islam, because I thought, well, okay, Jews believe in one God as well, and there are Christians, Unitarian Christians, that believe in one God. So there's no problem in that sense. I still can hate Islam, but of course I had my objections. So I thought, well, of course, Islamic tradition is anti-Christianity. They are anti-women. They're pro-violence. There were all concepts. There are a lot of Western people think that, and even people in India nowadays, in China or whatever. So it's the Islamophobia.
And this is used to justify oppression and persecution.
Yeah, and that's what you see. But I really believed it. It wasn't like a joke for me. I really believed that. So I was reading it, and then of course, like I said, I start reading also different sources, and that has to do with Abdul Hakim Murad, because he was one of the scholars that I wrote to. Because in the end, I was gaining so much information that was at odds with the things I thought I knew, even from an academic perspective. So I thought I have to read the Islamic sources, and I have to see what are the sources of those sources. But in the Western tradition, those sources, they refer to the Arabic sources. And sometimes, when after I researched it, I saw that those sources weren't Islamic sources. They were just sources of non-Muslim Arabics who wrote about this topic. But of course, most of the people don't read the sources of the sources. But I wanted to be correct, so I wrote to various authorities on religion, and one of them, when it came to Islam, was Abdul Hakim Murad from Cambridge University. And he said to me, well, you have to reread all your old books, and you have to dive into article so and so, and you have to do this and this. So, and you can see that where they take the wrong turn, where they translate it in a different way, and sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's just not on purpose because they don't know. It's not. It's
Sometimes it's selective.
yeah, and sometimes really people don't know. They just, oh, this word means that, etc. So, but in the end, if you see where they take the wrong turn, add some things, leave something out, and you have a whole other religion almost.
True.
And that's what happened to me. And I saw these two Islams in a way. I saw the Islam of the mind of me as an anti-Islamic Western, and I saw Islam from an Islamic perspective.
Two Islams.
Yeah, in a way. And of course, there is one Islam, but for me back then, I had two Islams in my mind. The evil Islam and the Islam that I didn't know yet.
Okay, let us stop here because this is the end of this episode, and we'll continue the story in the next episode if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
okay.